Well, I'd like to finish off this evening by looking at 2 or 3 psalms that I especially like and that I want to share with you. I think, given the fact that we got a lot of laments in the book of Psalms, that we ought to look at a lament. But at the same time, I've picked a lament which has special meaning for Christians, because this is a lament that is interpreted messianically by Christians. This is Psalm 22. If you'd all turn there, please. My God, why have you forsaken me? Is there an echo in here? Wow, no kidding. That's called the cry of dereliction, right? That's the statement that Jesus makes on the cross, one of his last words. That's interesting. It turns out that Jesus was not just making that up out of an empty mind and creating these words for the first time. He was quoting a psalm. And just as he knew his Old Testament quite well, all of those around him knew their Old Testament quite well. For him to have said that sentence would immediately have been recognized by Mary, John, everybody standing around, as a reference to Psalm 22. One way of designating a psalm back then was to say the first line. And that would be a way of saying, go look up the psalm that starts with the line, my God, why have you forsaken me? So let's assume that that's what Jesus was doing. Let's assume that he was not saying that he felt totally abandoned by God. I don't believe that's the case, because if he did feel that, then that would be sinful. That would be despair. I don't believe Jesus was despairing. I think he was quoting the psalm. So let's take a look at the psalm and see what it would mean for Jesus to have said as he hung on the cross. Go look up, and when this is all over, go look up Psalm 22. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me, from the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but find no rest. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. In you our ancestors trusted. They trusted, and you delivered them. To you they cried, and were saved. In you they trusted, and were not put to shame. But I am a worm, and no man, scorned by others, and despised by the people. All who see me mock at me. They make mouths at me. They shake their heads. Commit your cause to the Lord. Let him deliver you. Let him rescue the one in whom he delights. Yet it was you who took me from the womb. You kept me safe on my mother's breast. On you I was cast from my birth. And since my mother bore me, you have been my God. Do not be far from me, for trouble is near, and there is no one to help. Many bulls encircle me. Strong bulls of Bashan surround me. Using animals to refer to your enemies is fairly typical imagery in the Psalms. So this is a reference to the enemies that are troubling him. They open wide their mouths at me, like a ravening and roaring lion. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within my breast. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to my jaws. You lay me in the dust of death. For dogs are all around me. A company of evildoers encircles me. My hands and feet have shriveled. I can count all my bones. They stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among themselves, and for my clothing they cast lots. right? The Roman soldiers rolled dice to Have you noticed any other allusions, any other parallels between this psalm and the Passion narrative?
That I'm thirsty.
Now, yeah. I'm all dried up. My tongue clings to my mouth. Excellent, yeah. Oh, now, which verse is that? That's my 16. It might be your 15 or 17. Now, your translation says, my hands and my feet are pierced. Am I right? And mine says, my hand and my feet are shriveled. But if you look at your footnotes, my footnote is X. Meaning of Hebrew uncertain is what mine says. The root that's there, we're not quite sure how it should be translated, but it looks similar to the root for pierced, and it looks similar to the root for shriveled. So either one is a reasonable guess.
New Americans is so wasted on my hands and feet that I can count all my bones.
That's a possible parallel in and of itself.
Number of them alone.
Yeah, right. Oh, I thought of another one there too. What was that? Oh, all of the mockers around, right? Verse 8. They shake their heads at me and they say, "Submit your cause to the Lord. Let Him deliver you." Didn't the guy say that? There's a lot of parallels here to the Passion narrative. No wonder Jesus would have said to His followers, my God, why have you forsaken me?" In other words, go check out this psalm. We're at verse 19. "But you, O Lord, do not be far away. O my help, come quickly to my aid. Deliver my soul from the sword, my life from the power of the dog. Save me from the mouth of the lion. From the horns of the wild oxen you have rescued me. I will tell of your name to my brothers and sisters. In the midst of the congregation I will praise you. You who fear the Lord, praise Him. All you offspring of Jacob, glorify Him. Stand in awe of Him, all you offspring of Israel. For He did not despise or abhor the affliction of the afflicted. He did not hide His face from me, but heard when I cried to Him. From you comes my praise in the great congregation. My vows I will pay before those who fear Him. The poor shall eat and be satisfied. Those who seek Him shall praise the Lord. May your hearts live forever. All the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations shall worship before Him. For dominion belongs to the Lord, and He rules over the nations. To Him indeed shall all who sleep in the earth bow down. Before Him shall bow down all who go down to the dust, and I shall live for Him. Posterity will serve Him. Future generations will be told about the Lord, and proclaim His deliverance to a people yet unborn, saying that He has done it. Now, this is a lament that was written before Christ was ever born. So, the guy who originally wrote it, unless God gave him some special revelation to reveal the fact that Jesus was going to show up in 3 or 4 centuries or whenever this psalm was written, which I highly doubt, he wrote this psalm for himself. He wrote it about himself in his present situation. A group is troubling him. As in most laments, you can't be exactly sure what the problem is. You know, did the guy's wife just die? Did he lose his money in the stock market? Who knows what the problem might have been. Sometimes you can sort of tell that it's some kind of a disease or illness, but usually it's pretty generic what the problem is. Something is wrong. He has these rather typical descriptions of wolves of Bashan around me, troubling me. I don't think that the individual author of this psalm, as he wrote it, knew about the connections between what he was writing and what was going to happen when Jesus showed up. But he wasn't the only one writing that psalm. God was influencing the author of this psalm as he wrote it, and could have prompted him to add the fact of dry mouth, to add the fact of pierced hands and feet, and so on. So I'm assuming that that's what's going on. So Jesus could have pointed out to his disciples this psalm simply because of the rather shocking parallels between the details, lots for clothing and so on. But I think there's another reason why Jesus would have pointed this psalm out to his disciples. I think another point to this lament is it does something that most laments do. It starts off in present tense, describing how bad it is. And then halfway through, it switches to future tense, and it describes how good things are going to be once God helps the guy. Did you notice that? The switch occurs between verses 21 and 22 in my Bible. 21 is present tense and desperate. Save me from the mouth of the lion, from the horns of the wild oxen. But 22 switches to future tense. I will tell of your name in the midst of the congregation. I will praise you. I will glorify you. This is proleptic. He hasn't been helped yet. But he knows he's gonna. And he's expressing his confidence that God is going to help him. I think Jesus might have pointed to this lament in order to buck up the disciples, in order to give them some hope, so that they would not only notice parallels in detail to Jesus' situation, but would also see that even though things look dark and dismal and desperate at the moment, keep your faith in God. There is going to be a glorious Easter to come. And in fact, there's even a couple of statements here toward the end which are amazingly apropos to Jesus. We've said before in our lecture series that throughout most of the Old Testament period, Jews did not believe in an afterlife. They thought that you live this life, you die, you die. You get your rewards and punishments before you die. Starting around 165 BC with the book Daniel, the idea of resurrection starts to appear in Israelite theology, so that by the time Jesus is born, it's readily accepted by a lot of Jews. This psalm was probably written at a time when Jews did not believe in a resurrection. Nevertheless, look at what you get in those last verses. You get the statement, to him indeed, I'm at verse 29 for me, to him indeed shall all who sleep in the earth bow down. Now this is kind of a literary or figurative way of saying, even dead people, you're so great, you're so glorious, even dead people would worship you. Before him shall bow down all who go down to the dust, and I shall live for him. That's almost a indirect witness to the concept of resurrection before the concept had even entered Israelite theology. And then you have these other statements about my rehabilitation is going to be so great and glorious that word of it is going to spread all over the entire earth. Look at verse 27. All the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord. All the families of the nations shall worship before him when they hear how great and glorious his deeds have been on my behalf. And that fits, right, with what has happened. Word of what God did with Christ, resurrecting him, has spread out throughout the world. So I think it's a rather amazing psalm in a lot of ways. It also gives us a good example of a lament. Most of the laments have the same kind of form. First two-thirds describing the dire straits, last third saying thank you ahead of time, or the assumption that God is going to help. Psalm 23, everybody knows, comes right afterward. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Up to this point, in Psalm 23, we have a beautiful extended metaphor. The metaphor is, God is my shepherd and I am his sheep. And it's extended in lots of ways. He leads me beside water, which a shepherd does with sheep. His rod and his staff guide me. which is true for literal shepherds. But what most people don't notice is right at this point, the last two verses switch metaphors. Instead of sheep and shepherd, they switch to host and guest at a banquet. Verse 5, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. Common practice back then as a way of showing hospitality. Palestine is a rather hot and dusty land, so to put oil on a guest's head was a way of showing honoring you. My cup overflows at the table, you're pouring wine for me. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord with life. So really, Psalm 23 is two extended metaphors, one right after the other, both of which are very beautiful. Oh, hey, how about Psalm 8? You may have heard this one before, but well worth repeating. 8, Psalm 8. O Lord, our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. Out of the mouths of babes and infants, you have founded a bulwark because of your foes, to silence the enemy and the avenger. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, what are human beings that you're mindful of them, mortals that you care for them? Yet you have made them little lower than God, and crowned them with glory and honor. You have given them dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under their feet, all sheep and oxen, also the birds of the field, the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, and the fish of the sea, whatever passes through paths of ocean. O Lord, our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth. In the same way that Psalm 22 was a good example of a lament, and about a third or more of the Psalms are laments, half of the Psalms are laments. This is a good example of a hymn. A hymn is a song of praise. Hymns tend to be either praising God for creation or praising God for his marvelous deeds throughout history. The Exodus, Abraham, covenant, David, those sorts of things. Quickly, I want to come back to Psalm 8 and say a couple more things, but just to give you a quick example of this other type of hymn, which praises God for his deeds throughout history. Try 105. Don't lose your place on 8. We're coming back. Start with verse 8 of Psalm 105. He is mindful of his covenant forever, of the words that he commanded for 1,000 generations, the covenant that he made with Abraham, his sworn promise to Isaac, which he confirmed to Jacob as a statute, to Israel as an everlasting covenant, saying, to you I will give the land of Canaan as your portion for an inheritance. When they were few in number, of little account, and strangers in it, wandering from nation to nation, from one kingdom to another people, he allowed no one to oppress them. He rebuked kings on their account, saying, do not touch my anointed ones, do my prophets no harm. That's a reference to the prophet Balaam in the book of Numbers. Basically, the author here is going through the narratives, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and telling the story of Israel and of God's marvelous interventions on its behalf. So there is that type of psalm which praises God for his deeds in salvation history. The psalms that I prefer are the creation psalms. Especially Psalm 8, I think, is beautiful. You'll notice that the first and last verses are identical. Did you notice that? In Psalm 8? My translation has, O Lord, our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth. Now, that sentence is not an independent clause. It doesn't have a subject and verb. It's got an what's the term I want? Not expletive. Exclamation. It's an exclamation, yeah. How great is your majesty throughout the earth. Creation shows forth the majesty of God. Just by looking at creation. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, what time of day is it that he's looking up at the sky? Nighttime. There's something about the night sky that has a special religious effect on us human beings. You can look up at the daytime sky and it doesn't have the same effect. There's something about all those stars and all that immensity that just dwindles you by comparison. We've all had that experience, right? Looking at the night sky. And then he adds the work of your fingers. I mean, if the entire night sky is in relation to God, no bigger than that, because it's the work of his fingers, how immense must God be in comparison? I mean, if you felt dwindled from the night sky, think how dwindled you are in comparison to God. Now notice the syntax here. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, that's a when clause. That's a causal dependent clause. It ought to now say, when I do this, then such and such, but it doesn't. Instead, he breaks off that grammatical construction and starts off with an interrogative construction. What are human beings that you hear? It's like the grammar echoes the awe that he's feeling. It's like he's so overwhelmed that he just loses his track and has to say, what are we? You know what I'm talking about? Isn't that beautiful? It's great. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, what are human beings that you are mindful of them? Mortals that you care for us. And yet, despite our absolute infinitesimal, minuscule, puny existence, what has God done for us? Yet you have made us little lower than yourself. You've crowned us with glory and honor. You've given us dominion over the works of your hands. You put all things under our feet. These verses remind me of Genesis chapter 1. The first creation account has some phrases that are very similar, like birds of the air, fish of the sea, beasts of the field. I think it's Genesis chapter 1, verse 28 or so, that talks about dominion. You know, be fruitful and multiply, take dominion over. This is all echoes Genesis chapter 1, which makes me wonder if this might not have been written at a similar time. Genesis chapter 1 is probably written around 500, 400 BC. I think that's when this all changes. Anyway, he starts off saying, O Lord our sovereign, how majestic is your name throughout the earth. Then he goes through all of these contemplations or meditations and realizes just how majestic God is and how loving God has been to him, so that when he repeats the first line the second time, it does not mean the same thing. It now means all of that realization of God's majesty in creation that has been delineated in between. So even though it's the identical set of words, it's now richer and fuller because it includes the explication of God's majesty that occurs in the intervening verse. So this use of a refrain, I think, is very artistic. Want to know? Oh, hey, How about Psalm 39? This is kind of a nice one to do since we just did Job last time. Let me read the entire psalm and then we'll go back and look at detail. I said, I will guard my ways, that I may not sin with my mouth. I will keep a muzzle on my mouth, as long as the wicked are in my presence. So I was silent and still. I held my peace, to no avail. My distress grew worse. My heart became hot within me. The more I thought, the more the fire burned, until I had to speak with my tongue. Lord, let me know my end, and what is the measure of my days. Let me know how fleeting my life is. You have made my days a few handbreadths, and my lifetime is as nothing in your sight. Surely everyone stands as a mere breath. Surely everyone goes about like a shadow. Surely for nothing they are in turmoil. They keep up and do not know who will gather. And now, O Lord, what do I wait for? My hope is in you. Deliver me from all my transgressions. Do not make me the scorn of the fool. I am silent. I do not open my mouth, for it is you who have done it. Remove your stroke from me. I am worn down by the blows of your hand. When you chastise mortals in punishment for sin, you consume like a moth what is dear to them. Surely everyone is a mere breath. Hear my prayer, O Lord, and give ear to my cry. Do not hold your peace at my tears, for I am your passing guest, an alien, like all my forebears. Turn your gaze away from me, that I may smile again, before I depart and am no more. Would you call this a hymn or a lament? Lament. The guy's hurting. How do we know he's hurting? Verse 10, remove your stroke from me. I'm worn down by the blows of your hand. Something has been happening to him. Is it because his wife died, stock market crash? We don't know what the situation is. It doesn't say. Your footnote might suggest that it's a terminal illness, but that's a guess. We really can't know. It's a reasonable guess because there's references to the shortness of life. But really we don't know what this, and we don't need to know. Point is, bad things have happened to this guy. Now, to whom does he attribute these bad things that have happened to him? God. Remove your stroke from me. I am worn down by the blows of your hand. When you punish for sin, you consume like a moth what is dear to someone. He's lost something, possession, wife, something precious to him, health. So he blames God for this terrible tragedy that's occurred to him. So what's his response now that this has happened? His response is, okay, God did this. I'm going to sit down and shut up. That's what he says at the beginning. I said to myself, okay, I will guard my ways that I may not sin with my tongue. I'm not going to say nasty things to God, because he's God and I'm just a little human being. I will keep a muzzle on my mouth, like on a greyhound. Especially since the wicked are in my presence, and I don't want to give them ammunition against God. So, I was silent and still. I held my peace. Did it work? To no avail. My distress grew worse. My heart became hot within me. Why did it become hot? Did I caught fever? Why does he have a hot heart?
That's what it is.
Frustration, anger. He's mad at God. And it's getting more and more difficult not to lash out at God. And the more I thought about it, the more the fire burned until I spoke with my tongue and I said, Lord, let me know my end. What is the measure of my days? Let me know how fleeting my life is. You have made my days a few handbreadths. There's a handbreadth right there. If we have a few of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, not very long. My life is as nothing in your sight. Here's God way up here. Here is the universe moving through time down here. If God looks really close, he can find me. My lifetime is as nothing in your sight. Surely everyone stands as a mere breath. We are insubstantial. Like that. You can see it in frosty weather. But we're insubstantial. Surely everyone goes about like a shadow. Surely for nothing, everybody is in turmoil. Here we are, struggling to amass more money, pay the 30-year mortgage, and then we die. They heap up and do not know who will gather. Okay, so he lashed out, he got it out of the system, he told God off. Now he realizes he blew it. He was going to keep quiet and he didn't. So he gathers himself again and decides, all right, I'm going to be a good boy. Now, O Lord, what do I wait for? My hope is in you. Deliver me from all my transgressions. Do not make me the scorn of the fool. Notice, I am silent. I do not open my mouth. For it is you who have done it. Uh-oh, he shouldn't have thought that. Because now he starts to realize God did this to me. I'm mad at him. He starts to lose control of him. For it is you who have done it. Remove your stroke from me. I am worn down by the blows of your hand. You chastise mortals in punishment for sin, consuming like a moth what is dear to them. And everyone is of your breath. So once again, he intended to be silent. I am silent, I do not open my mouth. But then he opens his mouth and isn't silent. Verse 12 is the third and last attempt by him to be a good boy. Hear my prayer, O Lord, and give ear to my cry. Do not hold your peace at my tears. For I am your passing guest, an alien like all my forebears. Once again, he's acting pious and humble toward God and pleading for him, but then he has the image of himself as a passing guest. God is the host of earth. Earth is God's banquet hall. And I don't live here. I am passing through. And I might get to taste it for a few seconds, but then I'm gone. And not just me. This is true for my Father, too. I am your passing guest like all my forebears. My father came and went in a brief flicker of an eye. A shadow, a handbreadth, a mere breath. And my grandfather came and went in a flicker of an eye. And his father, and his father. All the generations all the way back. We have been momentary. So what's the point? If all you have is pain and suffering from God. Listen to how he ends. Look away from him, so I can smile one more time before I am no more. That's pretty despairing. So what do you think of this guy? If you were here, what would you say to him? Go ahead.
I think he's trying to obligate God in the end. Because
Trying to what?
Obligate.
Obligate God.
Because in the ancient cultures, they believed that a host was obligated to their guests.
I hadn't thought of that. That's a possibility. Although, that very last verse sounds awfully despairing. If he were being that subtle about it, it seems to me he sort of goes off into a darker emotion than mere cunning. But yeah, that's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of that.
It seems to me that it leads back to a point in time when the Jews did not believe in resurrection, that it was time to so that this is not just a breath I'm gone.
Oh, I think that's true too. That's definitely the case. Right. Right. Have you ever felt this way? Have you ever been angry with God? Oh, come on. That's up. Yes, you have been angry with God. I know you have. Everybody gets angry with God. How can you not get angry with God? Bad things happen, right? Now, in a way, we're better off than this guy. Because this guy lived at a time when everything that happens comes from God. It's just like Job, right? The good comes from God, the evil comes from God. So he assumes that all of this is what God wills for him. He doesn't realize God is love and so on. Granted all that, still, all of us, no matter how much we accept the New Testament revelation of God, we still tend to blame God for bad things that happen to us. And we do tend to get mad at him.
Well, maybe not blaming, we don't blame God anymore for the bad things that happen to us, but we blame him for not protecting us because he could.
Well, there you go. Isn't that blaming him?
Yeah.
Is it wrong for us, if we're angry at God, to let him know that we're angry? Like you're going to hide it from him? He knows exactly what you're feeling. Why not tell him? Isn't that part of a decent relationship, to be able to express what your feelings are? I mean, think about, most of you are married, think about your spousal relationships. If throughout your marriage you're never able to express your anger at your spouse, what kind of a relationship is that? You ought to be able to let your spouse know when the dirty socks on the floor or whatever are bothering you. You ought to be able to let them know. I saw that. Even over. So in a way, although I'm troubled by the depth of his despair at the end, and I wish that I could console him, in a way I sympathize with him, and I understand him. And I don't think God sent this kind of help for having expressed this kind of anger. I think God would understand that if he just lost his wife or whatever the difficulty may be, this is the way we feel sometimes. And it's not the end of the world to feel it. Well, we only have 2 minutes left. I guess I'll have to